Liechtenstein looks like a fairy tale country. A castle on a hill, cows in the meadow. A road sign is basically the only proof you've crossed into a new nation at all. 40,000 people live here, in a space smaller than most city airports. There's no army. There's no airport. There isn't even a Liechtenstein currency. They use the Swiss franc. And yet this fairy tale strip of land produces more income per person than almost anywhere on Earth. More than Switzerland. More than the United States. A single family still holds legal ownership over huge parts of the country's wealth in a way that would be unthinkable anywhere else in modern Europe. And for years, this tiny Alpine nation quietly sat at the center of one of the biggest financial scandals in German history. We're going to walk through how a country with no ports, no minerals, and fewer residents than a small town became one of the richest places on the planet. Who actually runs it? Why did its own royal family end up at the heart of a continent-wide tax investigation? And how does a nation this small still get to write its own rules? To find the answers, we have to start 300 years ago, with a family that bought this land without ever visiting it. The Liechtenstein dynasty were wealthy nobles based in Vienna, and for a long time they had a problem money couldn't fix on its own. They were rich, but they had no seat in the Holy Roman Empire's parliament because a seat required owning actual territory within the empire's borders. So in 1699 and again in 1712, they bought two small, unremarkable pieces of land, Vaduz and Schellenberg. They didn't buy them for the scenery, they bought them for the paperwork. No prince from the family even set foot in the place for over 100 years. The first ruling prince to actually visit didn't arrive until 1818. That detail matters more than it sounds like it should, because the country's entire modern economy is built on the exact same idea. For its first 2 centuries as an independent state, Liechtenstein wasn't rich. It was tiny, agricultural, and economically bolted to its much bigger neighbor, Austria-Hungary. Then World War I ended, Austria-Hungary collapsed, and Liechtenstein's textile industry, its customs partner, and its currency all went down with it. The country fell into real poverty. Farmers, a few thousand of them, tried to survive a hunger crisis with almost no industry left standing. It got worse after World War II, when the royal family itself was cash, poor enough that they sold off family art to stay afloat, including a Leonardo da Vinci portrait sold to an American museum for $5 million. The country needed a new economic anchor, and in 1923 it found one. Liechtenstein signed a customs and monetary union with Switzerland, adopting Swiss trade rules and the Swiss franc. It was a small, quiet treaty at the time. It ended up being the single decision that saved the country. Stability alone doesn't explain what happened next, though. Through the 1960s and 70s, Liechtenstein's government made a calculated bet, turned the entire country into the easiest possible place on earth to park money. A flat 12.5% corporate tax rate, fast, cheap company formation, anonymous foundations and trusts that let the real owner of an asset stay legally invisible. None of this was invented here. Switzerland had already built the modern playbook for banking secrecy decades earlier. Liechtenstein copied it, then pushed it further than Switzerland was willing to go. It worked almost too well. Within a few decades, Liechtenstein had more registered companies than actual citizens. Thousands of foundations and letterbox entities, most of them with no employees, no office, and no real presence beyond a filing cabinet. Those entities alone provided roughly a third of the entire country's government revenue. The royal family's own bank, LGT, grew into one of the largest private wealth managers in the world. Hilti, a precision tools company also headquartered there, gave the country a second legitimate industrial identity to sit alongside the financial one. Then, in 2008, it all came apart at once. A former employee at LGT, Heinrich Kieber, had walked out with a copy of the bank's client data. He sold it to Germany's Foreign Intelligence Service. What followed became the largest tax evasion investigation in German history at that point, eventually reaching close to 1,000 names across more than a dozen countries. The most prominent name was Klaus Zumwinkel, the CEO of Deutsche Post, raided by police outside his own home and later convicted of tax evasion. The bank at the center of the scandal wasn't some anonymous shell. It belonged to the same family that has ruled the country since 1699. To be fair, Liechtenstein didn't invent the demand for secrecy. It just built the supply. Wealthy people from Germany, Britain, and elsewhere came looking for exactly what Liechtenstein was selling, and Liechtenstein sold it to them. Under international pressure, Liechtenstein landed on an OECD list of uncooperative tax havens and was forced to start signing information sharing agreements it had resisted for years. But at home, the same royal family had already moved the other direction. Back in 2003, Prince Hans Adam II put his own expanded powers to a public vote, the right to veto laws, dismiss the elected government and approve judges, and won. Europe's own human rights body raised concerns about it at the time. In one of the wealthiest democracies on the continent, a single hereditary monarch now holds more direct political power than almost any other head of state in Europe. So here's where the picture splits in two. On one hand, turning a landlocked scrap of farmland with no resources into the highest income per person on earth is a genuine feat of economic engineering. And Hilti alone proves the country can build real, exportable industry, not just paperwork. On the other hand, a meaningful share of that wealth was built on a system explicitly designed to hide other people's fortunes from their own governments, run by a family who also happens to hold outsized control over the country's laws. Both of those things are true at the same time, and neither one cancels the other out. So let's recap where we've landed. A family bought land it didn't care about, just to get a vote in an empire that no longer exists. That land, nearly starved after Austria-Hungary collapsed, got rescued by a treaty with Switzerland, then reinvented itself as a copy of Swiss banking secrecy, taken further than Switzerland ever went. That reinvention made Liechtenstein staggeringly rich, and then blew up in the family's own bank in 2008, dragging the country's biggest financial secret out into the open. Since then, the rules have tightened everywhere. Automatic tax information sharing between countries is now standard, and the old anonymous foundation model is far harder to run than it used to be. Liechtenstein has leaned harder into legitimate wealth management and precision manufacturing to make up the difference. And so far, the income numbers haven't dropped. What's less clear is whether a single family can keep being both the country's banker and its ruling monarch forever without one of those roles eventually colliding with the other. There's an old line about small operations. The harder it is to see how someone makes their money, the more carefully you should look. Liechtenstein spent 3 centuries proving that line right, on a scale most countries 1,000 times its size never manage. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.